Okay, hello everybody, can you hear me? Because I'm not tall enough for the microphone, I don't think. Well, my presentation is going to be very practical. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm an archaeologist with the Historic Environment Division in Northern Ireland. I've been with them since 2002, and my time since 2002 has been involved in site conservation and heritage management and provision of advice in that regard. I've been involved in a lot of conservation projects, a lot of them industrial heritage to do with canals and locks and things, and at the moment I'm involved since the past 4 years with an historic mill project called Ballycopeland Windmill in County Down, and I'm here today with my colleague James Patience, who's our surveyor, and my other colleague John Avent, who's a consulting engineer, who have both been key members of that team. My panellists are Joanna Turska from the Industrial Heritage Networks, Sally Montgomery from the Titanic Foundation, and Rachael Farrington from Visit Britain. So what I want to do today is to give very much an overview. As I say, it's going to be very low-key and practical, and hopefully quick. But what I'm going to say today is very much of an overview, and really I want to act as a trigger for my other colleagues on the panel to go into perhaps a wee bit more detail in some of the points. Now, there's absolutely nothing I'm going to say that you don't already know, because we're all of a collective mind, but it's important that we know that industrial heritage sites present specific opportunities and challenges, but we really need to consider what do we need to think about whenever we present to the public. And when I say the public, it is not the people in this room, because we're converted. It's really those people who have no background or knowledge to the place that they're coming to visit, or knowledge or even interest in any heritage site whatsoever. How do we engage them? How do we get them interested and passionate in it and want to come back? Because without that external support, we're sunk, because we can't act as a closed shop. So really what I want to talk about is just give an overview of a few of the opportunities, the challenges, what do we have to consider, and are there some key principles that perhaps we can come up with for presenting industrial heritage sites to the public? Because at the moment we're involved at Ballycopeland in the second phase of the project. We've done a lot of the conservation work, but now we're into a development phase where we are hopefully going to get in our terms, quite a large grant to really take the site forward, and the presentation and interpretation is part of that. And it would have been helpful for us to have some key principles to think about that we can give to our interpretation designers to say, okay, these are the key things that we need to have built in and to have thought about here, where we're sort of like working that out as we're going along. In terms of opportunities, obviously, a lot of these sites have some connection and living memory, and that's unique to industrial heritage sites. In my job, I deal with all sorts of sites, from stone circles to castles to the whole range of history and prehistory. But it was only whenever I started really working at the windmill that I realised that the value and the importance of the living memory component, and how can we harness that. Similarly, the local connections. Many of these sites, it was the massive employer in the local area. It was the site created in many ways the community. So that's a really important thing to harness also. There's often more physical survival, obviously, at these sites, and therefore it's much easier for people to visualise how the site operated and worked and was used. And how do we harness these opportunities in the presentation schemes that we devise? In terms of challenges, these are complex machines often. Now, this is probably going to seem a bit strange that I've put a picture of the cab of a locomotive, but I will tell you now, I am not an industrial heritage specialist. Whenever I came to the Ballycopeland windmill, for example, I knew absolutely nothing about windmills, and it took me actually a long time for the rest of my team to actually get me to understand it, because I was the one doing the spreadsheets. And really, I am the audience that we really want to engage. The people who don't understand it, the people are coming and want to learn about it, want to understand it, but really need to have it explained. So we do need, I think, in our experience, we need to have more explainers at these sites, because there's more things there and there's more detailed component parts. It actually needs more explanation in many cases. And as an example of this, and I don't know whether this is going to work, but at Ballycopeland Windmill, it's actually unique now because it is the last extant site that has a very specific our blind system on the sails called the roller reefing system, and it took the team a while to actually understand how it worked, and because we had the component parts but they were all disparate and we had to get them put back together. And this was a prototype that our joiner worked up in the yard, and it was only then that I really understood it. Sorry, I don't know, I'm not sure that this is going to work, unfortunately. No, well, unfortunately, my fabulous video isn't going to work, but it's really interpretation and presentation in action. And what we're going to do as part of our interpretation scheme at this site is to build a scale model of it, so that whenever visitors come to the site, they're actually able to operate it themselves, because that's actually going to make it sense to them, as it were. So in terms of other challenges, obviously these were workplaces. There were a lot of additional hazards that have now to be managed. They were never meant to be as visitor attractions. Many were dusty, noisy environments, and now we have to have them in a condition and present them in a way that the visitor can enjoy their experience and can understand and appreciate their experience at our sites. Obviously, health and safety is a big one. We may need to implement amendments to the site to make it accessible. Now, this is a very, very basic example, but it makes the point. And let me see. We'll see where this is Lock 12 on the Lagan navigation, and actually the canal that now goes past what is actually a new development. Was a mill site originally, but it's now the council offices and the car park. I'm basically standing in the car park, and so people actually have to cross over the lock gates to get to the council offices. So they've put in a little extension along here, a walkway, and it's very simple, it's very basic, but it actually makes the site workable, and those are sorts of things that we need to think about. But it doesn't actually detract from the site at all, and that's really the trick. In terms of appeal, now don't shoot me here, but I know that we all love industrial heritage sites, but I know it's hard to believe, but there's a lot of people out there that don't, unbelievably. But that's the audience that we want. They are the people that we want to get to be in love with our sites, and they may on the face of it come across as less romantic, less exciting as a big jazzy castle, less exotic or whatever, but that's only to the uninitiated, and our presentation and interpretation needs to actually work to get the people who don't care to absolutely love it and get committed and behind it, and that is our challenge. In terms of resources, obviously resources, blah, 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 We never have enough resources, but it actually isn't just obviously money, it's the people, it's the time, it's also the space, because a lot of these sites, there's lots of things that we would like to do in terms of presentation that we can't do because there's stuff there and it's actually in the way. So how do we present and make these sites interesting and accessible to people while retaining the integrity of the site? Hence, is that one of our principles? And in terms of what do we have to consider, audience is, in my mind, the key thing. You have to assume that your audience has no knowledge of your site. You're not speaking to the converted. So we have to know our site really well. We have to test it so that we make sure that our content is correct. At Ballycullen Windmill, we've been running enhanced conservation open days since we started the project, so that we actually now know how the site works for the visitor, so that whenever we got to the development phase, we actually were able to advise the designers in terms of visitor flow, for example, in terms of dwell time. Where do we want the visitor to stay longer? Where do we need the visitor to move quickly past because it acts as a bottleneck? All of those things are really, really important for these sites, actually more than any other kind of heritage site. Also, these sites are often not used for the purpose that they were originally created for. So who is our audience? Because these sites, like for example, the canal shot of the lock gates that I had in the previous slide, a lot of the users of that are the users of the council buildings now. They are walkers, they are cyclists, they're not canal boat owners, for example. So we have to tailor our presentation to both our existing users and who we want our future users to be. And also what we want the uninitiated person to know. What do we want them to come away with? Do we want them to come back? I would say probably yes. So other things have to be considered. Do we need a cafe? Do we need a children's play area? Do we need adequate parking? How do we build that into the scheme without, again, losing the integrity of the site? This, if I press the right button, this one here, this image is at Ballycullen's, the extended Kilman's house, but that's I've put that in to represent our community engagement. Never ever underestimate the value of the community engagement. And that's really what Tim was making a massive point about, and the support that can bring, because without the community support, and that particular site is about a mile out of a really, really teeny small village, but without that village's support, we would never actually have got the funding to begin the conservation project, never mind anything else. So that small village support has actually underpinned every single thing that we've been able to do at that site up to now and going forward in the future. In terms of other things to consider, what we have actually went to other mill sites to talk to other colleagues, and the advice that we've been given over and over is the hands-on experience. So it's the doing, it's the working, it's that's what people want to do, that's what people want to remember. Really today, everybody's used to looking at screens, nobody's going to read reams and reams of stuff, but if you actually see something working, see something operated, that this image here is at Blennerville Windmill in County Cork. County Kerry, oh my God, that's really bad. County Kerry. Please tell me there's nobody from Kerry in the audience. But simple operation of a rotary quern actually tells 1,000 stories, because that actually explains the entire mill process that everybody's standing in. What I would also say is presentation and promotion go hand in hand. Really, you could have the best presentation and interpretation in the world, but unless you promote it correctly, you're not going to get your audience in. So that all has to be built in also. And the presentation and promotion needs to be part of the consideration right at the outset and throughout the progression of any development scheme. It's often thought about too late. That was actually a point that my colleague Joanna actually brought up to me. It needs to be built into the master planning, and luckily that's what we have done at Ballycopeland. Often the presentation and the promotion is thought about whenever the project is too far advanced, and then you realise that, oh well, we should have done this and we should have done that. But you really need to be able to focus on the detail, but have the whole overview also, which is much easier said than done. So the methods that we have, we've static, we've moving, we've online resources. Obviously that's a key now. Social media is the key, and the networking, and I think Joanna will talk a lot more about that next. So therefore, in conclusion, I mean, can we come up with some overarching key principles? Happy for anybody and everybody to come up to me with their suggestions at lunchtime. Very happy for that. That would be great. So now I'd like to invite Joanna Turska from the Industrial Heritage Networks to come up. And hopefully your presentation will appear. Thank you.
Right. Hi, I'm Joanna Turska. I'm the Industrial Heritage Support Officer for England, or IHSO for short, and I'm going to talk to you about the Industrial Heritage Networks, or the new regional support for industrial heritage sites or organisations in England. And hopefully this works. Yay. There are approximately 600 publicly accessible industrial heritage sites across England. They include mine sites, ironworks, various mill types, museums with industrial collections, pumping stations, canals, railways, and many, many more. They are managed by building preservation trusts, public bodies, voluntary groups, or other charitable trusts, with about 35% of all those sites wholly or largely cared for by volunteers only. Those sites face numerous challenges, such as volunteer retention and recruitment, technical skills transfer from an aging volunteer base, adapting to a radically changing funding and visitor environments, and achieving modern best practice conservation, management, and interpretation standards. These challenges have been highlighted in the two English Heritage, now Historic England reports, the Public Access to England's Preserved Industrial Heritage from 1998 and Sustaining England's Industrial Heritage from 2008. In response to these concerns and the following two recommendations from those two reports, the Industrial Heritage Support Officer post was created. The IHSO is a one-person project funded via Historic England's National Capacity Programme, and it's managed by the Ironbridge Gorge Museum Trust and works in partnership with Association for Industrial Archaeology, Association of Independent Museums, and also European Route of Industrial Heritage. The project has been successfully running since 2012, with overall aim of improving the long-term sustainability of preserved industrial heritage sites. I've been in a post since April last year, and over the last 10 months or so, I've focused on developing the industrial heritage networks. Now, the networks offer free peer-to-peer support, bringing together all industrial heritage sites and organizations from across England to support each other and to work together towards becoming sustainable. Here are group picks from just some of our meetings to date. We've had 9 meetings over the last few months, and we've got another 10 meetings confirmed for autumn already. Each network meets twice a year, and we will communicate via an online platform between the meetings throughout the year. Networks are very inclusive and open to staff and volunteers at all levels. There have been 7 networks established to date, with 2 more in development in East Midlands and Yorkshire, with the inaugural meetings set for September. And I have just confirmed the host for the final network in East of England, which will be on the 10th of October at the Burwell Museum and Windmill in Cambridgeshire. Each meeting is hosted by a different site, and meetings are informal and friendly. The host chooses the theme for the day with members joining in discussions and brainstorming, sharing their experiences. The theme can focus on a success or a challenge, a success or an achievement that the host would like to share with the members as a best practice example, or an issue or a challenge which the host would like to, again, discuss or brainstorm around and potentially find solutions for dealing with it. To date, some of the themes included industrial heritage interpretation, embracing social media, balancing commercial and charitable, and empowering collections. Now, to focus on the example, specifically what we're talking about in this particular theme, is how we present sites or our heritage, our industrial heritage to the public. And this example is from a meeting of the West Midlands Network last November at the Birmingham Museum's Collection Centre, where the focus was on heritage interpretation, specifically on interpretation of objects which don't have connections with famous people, places, or industrial revolution. The research assistant at the Birmingham Museum's Trust talked about looking at new original ways of interpreting such objects and used the button-making machine as an example, and that's the machine pictured over here, and that's the collection center kind of overview of it. It's huge. The research assistant asked members to think about how they would go about interpreting that particular machine. And in response, one of the members talked about focusing on what the machine made and using the person behind the object to tell its story, or rather to think about it as the story of a button. Members then agreed that stories we tell should look at the human aspect and relate to people nowadays. This could be done by using social history and linking stories from the past to the present to involve visitors through relating to their current life. Providing a context for the object's function, for example, displaying a dress with buttons and asking and answering questions like, how did the button get to be on that lovely dress? Who was the person that made it? How did they make it? And even where the buttons come from today and how that compares to when the button-making machine was operational, and helping visitors relate through that and better understand the object and its purpose. During meetings, Network's members have also highlighted other pressing issues across the sector, issues influencing how they present their heritage to the public, including health and safety, especially when working with and interpreting dangerous machinery and large objects, dealing with traditional skills decline and lack of appropriate training and succession planning, looking at ways for the public to get more involved with the collections, including the ones not on display, trying to engage new, more diverse audiences, also investigating who their visitors are and what their expectations are, and perhaps most importantly, ensuring they become or continue to be relevant to their audiences, including their staff and volunteers. These and other issues will be the focus of future network meetings across all the regions. My role allows me to bring all the industrial heritage sites and organizations together and help them organize initial meetings. I facilitate each network's development and provide tools and resources for networks' growth, including access to the dedicated network's website, which is the screenshot in the middle of the homepage. The website is there for members to use for promotion and knowledge sharing. Members can post news stories, advertise vacancies, volunteering opportunities, promote events and exhibitions, and anything else that they would like to shout about and share with the sector. The goal is for all the networks to eventually become self-sufficient and able to keep going whether there's funding or not. My task is to ensure the resources are free and show members that they will be able to continue meeting, sharing best practice, and supporting each other without external help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Now I would like to introduce Rachael Farrington. She is the Senior Policy and Public Affairs Executive in Visit Britain.
Hello everyone, my name's Rachael and I'm part of the Tourism Affairs team at Visit Britain and Visit England. I'm going to really rush through my presentation as quickly as possible, so please do come and grab me at lunch if you have any questions. Just to give you a brief overview about us, as you may know, Visit Britain is the National Tourist Board with a focus on promoting Britain overseas. Visit England, meanwhile, focuses on the domestic market, creating product and encouraging additional spend at home. But what do we do for industrial heritage? Our international always-on campaign, called I Travel For, has used heritage assets throughout the campaign, most recently a social media video, which includes some narrowboating in Bradford-upon-Avon. Our domestic campaign, My Microgap, which targets millennials, also includes heritage assets. And a link to a video here, which I won't be able to show you, shows a video we created with our commercial partners, Vice, where we go down into the Newcastle Victoria tunnels. We also have a wide range of industrial heritage assets, which you can see a few of along the bottom. And just to point out that the Glenfinnan Valley picture was used in an international campaign in Shanghai in China, where we wrapped an entire train with that image and took over the panels inside the train too. That image also featured on Ctrip, which is kind of the China's version of Booking.com, on their homepage. I just wanted to rattle through a few of the support systems that we also have in place for tourist attractions and including heritage assets Visit Britain has. So one of the most successful projects that we've had over the past few years has been the Discover England Fund. So this £40 million fund over 3 years was all about creating bookable product, making it easy for products to be marketed overseas. And it was meant to be quite a small project with about 5 projects being funded, and we've funded 66 to date. It's been an incredibly successful project, and a lot of these have included heritage assets. I just thought I'd introduce you to a couple of them. So we have England's Waterways, which focuses on the canals throughout the Midlands. We have North of England City Experience, which has a rail link between the major northern cities, and the itineraries included in that feature Manchester's Quays and the Liverpool Docklands. And the Great West Way, which is, again, another touring route with a single rail ticket, which has also been matched up with the bus itineraries. That features assets such as the Clifton Suspension Bridge and Brunel's SS Great Britain. We offer further support for tourism businesses, particularly in England. So we have the Business Advice Hub, which is an online hub, which features everything from marketing advice to legal. And most recently, we've launched the Taking England to the World Toolkit, which is all about getting businesses to trade internationally, get you on those paths to getting more international visitors to your attractions. And as part of this, we're also doing workshops around the country to really engage with the industry. And one of the last things I wanted to speak to you about is TXGB, which is our newest project, which was launched last week. This is a B2B platform that we've created with DEF funding, and it's to help suppliers of all sizes and all nature to connect with international booking platforms. So it creates a central hub for booking platforms to make it as easy as possible to get your products, your business online and marketed internationally. So some of the distributors we've teamed up with include Ctrip, Agoda, Booking.com, TripAdvisor, and we're adding even more as we speak to be appropriate for some of the projects that we've already got on there. This is obviously a really new project, and we'd really like you to be involved, and we're hoping to see around 5,000 suppliers on the platform by March 2020. That was really, really quick, so please do come and speak to me afterwards. I'd be really happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. And finally, I would like to introduce Dr. Sally Montgomery from the Titanic Foundation, and she is going to speak to us about the new lighthouse project.
Well, now for something completely different. So I'm going to talk to you about an object, and you can probably gather that it's not bricks and mortar. I'm a board trustee of Titanic Foundation. We're a small charity that was set up as a special purpose vehicle for the development of Titanic Belfast, which won the World Visitor Attraction of the Year award in 2016. Since its creation, the foundation has been involved in acquiring assets such as Nomadic, which is the last White Star Line ship, and she was the tender for Titanic at Cherbourg and Cove. We are trying to develop a maritime destination. It's difficult because we are also outside the city element, and it's quite difficult to get the council to see, but they are engaging and they have been tremendous support of late. However, about 3-4 years ago, we got a letter from Irish Lights. Now, Irish Lights are the commission that looks after the lighthouses around the island of Ireland. You have Trinity House in England and Wales, and the Northern Lighthouse Board in Scotland. And they asked us whether we could find a home for an optic which was 7 metres high, weighing 10 tonnes. And it's difficult, it's a big beast. So we had a lot of questions, and our questions are in fact our challenges, because where is Mew Island? And Mew Island is off the coast of Donaghadee. It's about 20 miles from Belfast. It's a major lighthouse for shipping coming into the harbour. An optic is, I'll explain what an optic is in a minute, but we had to answer all of these questions before we could start to engage. And those questions came to me as I'm the scientist on the board. So an optic is in fact this structure here. It consists of lenses and the supporting apparatus. Round the country, in fact around the world, these optics are coming out of the lantern, and this is the lantern around here. And the lantern protects the lens. Now, they're coming out because of this structure here, which was introduced in the 1890s, which is a mercury bath. It is only for moving lenses, but because mercury is so toxic, the mercury is coming out, and that stops the lens rotating naturally. So that means that all of the lighthouse authorities are finding more economical ways of lighting their lights with solar-powered batteries and LED lights. It's just a bit of history. This comes back from Augustus Jean Fresnel in 1823, who actually established the Fresnel lens. It was an absolute revolution, and all of our lighthouse lenses are based on this. He created 6 orders, so the smallest you use in rivers, the largest, which is the first order lens, are used around the coastal lights. They produce a fantastic light that could be seen for something like 20 to 28 miles. Only 3,326 Fresnel lenses were made. They are rapidly disappearing. The main lens makers were the French, Barbier and Fenestra, for example, but also the Chance brothers in Smethwick in England. Our lens, although Irish Light said was a first order lens, was not. It was a hyperradial lens. And lenses are based on their focal length. So a first order lens is 920 millimeters, and a hyperradial is 1,200 millimeters. It's huge. So was our lens special? Very, very much so. So hyperradial lenses, the very first one was made in 1887. It was made for a lighthouse on Tory Island, which is off Donegal. It was created because of the need for a much stronger light for shipping coming across the North Atlantic. This optic got split in the mid-1920s, and my thanks to the Chance Brothers archives, who actually solved a lot of the clues. If they hadn't digitized the archives, we would have great difficulty in interpreting the story. But they took this 3-layered optic, which had 18 lenses, they split it in 2. One went to Tory Island and one went to Mew Island, and that's the one we were being asked to look after. It had only 30 were ever made, only 18 left, and only 4 are displayed. So our other challenge was to get it off the island. It was being crated up, and we had to float it out to the Gormley, which is Irish Light's ship. Irish Lights restored it beautifully, and then our next challenge was how to display it. It had to rotate. So these are massive magnifying lenses. They are not death rays that could burn a building on site. The heat comes within the optic, so that is where the potential for the fire is. So the challenge to the architects was this thing had to rotate without mercury. So they create a rotating machinery to rotate it underneath a platform. So our idea was to create this iconic landmark on the Belfast waterfront, to display it next to the water where it belonged, and to create a visitor attraction. The opportunity was then to link other heritage sites by building a walkway. So on the north side is HMS Caroline, which was recently shortlisted for the Art Fund, and also the Thompson Dock, which is the dry dock for Olympic and Titanic. And on the other side is Titanic Belfast and SS Nomadic. We did a huge amount of public engagement. The first one, and absolutely right, talking about communities. The community felt we had taken this lens out deliberately so we could display it. They had not understood the timeline of Irish Lights already taking it out because of technical reasons, and so our first port of call was to explain it to them. They know nothing about the history of the lens, they just miss the light shining on the sea. Our history of lighthouses is based on the building, it's not based on the lights, on the lenses, and there's a great opportunity to actually do more work on this. So these are all of the many things that we did, including helpers and volunteers who actually help explain the site. The other difficulty was the interpretation, because the interpretation is a very, very complex story. It involves 2 lighthouses, two islands, the splitting, the whole history of why it was created, as well as the people's story. For those of you who like lighthouses and find them romantic, lighthouse keepers left in the mid-1990s. So their whole story, their archiving of their story is an absolute must. So I did the research and I did the interpretation. And so my challenge was to create 10 panels that were standalone. You did not need to read them on a linear basis. You could come up to any panel and get a full story. So this beautiful object now shines, and we call it the Great Light. It is not without its challenges even now, because the rotation device has given us problems, but it is a beautiful thing, and I hope if you come to Belfast, you find it out. If you'd like to know more, there is a website, and you'll find the history, the interpretation, and the educational materials on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally, and thank you to all 3 of my panellists. I very much appreciate it. So really, just in summary for this session, it really does reinforce. I think we've all reinforced each other in terms of it's the human aspect of these sites that is important. It's the context. It's how we tie these sites into our current lives that will make it interesting for the visitor and give us sustainability going forward. It's we need to make our sites relevant to our audience, and as Rachael was reinforced, marketing is key. We need to engage with the organisations that can help us with this. We don't always have to know well, we can't know everything, that's impossible, but we need to harness the people with the types of expertise that we lack. We need to be able to get the support that we don't have, and have the network links that we don't have, which is what Joanna is dedicating her time to. It's the human story behind the thing, the place. That is what is interesting, not necessarily just the mechanics of the thing itself. And again, the community engagement, as Sally said, and reinforcing the importance of the explainers, because that is what makes it fabulous. Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity and your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to Maybelline and all our panellists this morning. I'm sorry we've not been able to get to a Q&A, but I'm sure everybody will be very approachable at lunchtime. If you could all be back in the room by about 1ish, we can hopefully stick to time this afternoon. So thank you very much.